Are you a buyer or an investor and you're tired of getting outbid on properties here in today's current market? Well, this is Reginald Perryman with RegiusRealEstate.com. Today I'm going to show you some strategies on how to get your offer accepted. So what we're going to do here is we're going to look at a purchase agreement here, right? A lot of times what people do is they assume that the highest price is always going to win. And we're going to break this down today so that you have a better understanding why price is not always the deciding factor for most sellers. So let's look here. So if we look here, a purchase agreement consists of price and terms. That's very important. The terms are just as important as the price in most cases. That's why the purchase agreement has multiple clauses in it. So here you look at price. For example, if we were making an offer on this property, we will have the price simply listed here. But then you have the types of financing. Is it going to be a cash offer, or is the offer going to be cash subject to financing such as FHA, conventional, hard money, private money lending, and things of that nature? Or do you want seller financing? Here in Michigan we call that land contract. And then a closing date. So for example, if you make an offer on a property and it's a cash deal, for example, but someone else made a similar offer, but the other person can close in 2 weeks, but you want 30 days to close, that's going to affect your offer. Makes sense. It's common sense, nothing new there. But then you get into the other terms of the purchase agreement. That's why when most sellers are asking for highest and best, highest meaning price, best means the terms. So when you look at a situation where the seller is just going to give you the keys at closing, you simply have immediate occupancy. But here, and we're going to break this part down later, this is where you're giving the seller a certain period of time after closing to continue to stay in the property. So let's say you're buying from a seller who needs to also buy another home, and they're not going to be able to close on that property until this property closes first. So in other words, they need to sell, take the proceeds from that sale so that they can purchase their next home, but that's going to take some time, and maybe you give them 30 days and you're going to charge them a daily rate. So basically they're going to pay you. The way this is set up, we'll explain it, how to protect yourself with an additional security deposit, and who's holding the money, in other words, as well. Then you have other terms. So you have, does the buyer, you as the buyer, do you want a home warranty? If you're an investor, you're probably not going to ask, in most cases, the seller to pay for a home warranty, but some investors do. Then you have property inspection. The time frame is very important. So let's say buyer A makes an offer and they want 10 days to complete their inspection. Buyer B makes an offer and they only need 3 days. So just to give you an idea, put yourself in the seller's shoes. If I'm the seller and there's a chance that you're gonna change the terms, or you're gonna change your offer, or just tell me no, you no longer want to go through with the deal, the sooner you tell me no, the sooner I can get to the other buyers. So keep that in mind. I'm going to allow you to buy my property. I'm going to give you 3 days to tell me no versus 10 days. Some people even put in 15 days. In a seller's market, 15 days may put you at risk of not winning that bid, depending on the type of inspections you want. If it's a multifamily or commercial property, we can see the due diligence period, is what we call this, can be stretched out 30 days to several months in some cases if you're doing like environmental inspections and things of that nature. But for the sake of this video, let's just focus on single family residential properties. Typically you're going to have your private home inspection. You may have a sewer scope where there's a plumber that's going to run a scope through the sewer line and make sure there's no blockage or damage in the piping and sewer system or storm drain. You can have your well and septic inspections and things of that nature, your lead-based paint inspection. So all of this is going to have a timeline as to when you're going to make your discovery about the property's condition. Some purchase agreements will have different inspection clauses as well. City inspection, who's going to be responsible for it? So the city, in most cities, they don't care who pay for the inspection, they just want it done, right? So who's going to pay for it and who's going to be responsible for the repairs? We'll talk about that here briefly. So all of these, most people are stuck on the first page. If you're making an offer, here's some additional things you can do, either right inside of the purchase agreement, or you can add an addendum to help you negotiate your offer. So let's talk about a few things. We're going to look at appraisal guarantees, escalation clauses, occupancy and security deposits, multiple offers, as well as seller's concessions, inspections, and repairs. So basically, this is a great one that's working out for buyers who really want the home. Now, I have to tell you, when you come to my buyers seminar, I'm going to explain why doing this sometime may or may not be in your best interest, but it all depends on your need for that particular property. But simply here, an appraisal guarantee is when the buyer says, I'm going to guarantee the seller a certain dollar amount above appraisal value. So there's two ways that this works. One, the buyer agrees to pay a dollar amount above the appraisal value. So for this example, let's say the offer is for $200,000 and the buyer saying basically, I'm willing to pay cash above the appraisal value up to $200,000. To the seller, this is guaranteeing the seller is going to receive $200,000 even if the home appraises for $190,000. This scenario comes up a lot when you have a property that was listed for $190,000 and there's multiple offers and people start bidding the price up, and someone says, okay, I'm just going to offer $200,000, but the seller and the listing agent is saying, I don't think this home is going to appraise for $200,000. The buyer says, I don't care what it appraises for, I'm willing to guarantee $200,000. So let's say the home appraises for $190,000 or $180,000. The buyer is willing to bring the difference in cash to closing. So in other words, their loan is going to be based on the appraised value of $190,000 or $180,000, whatever the appraised value is, and the buyer is going to pay the difference in cash. So this is a way as a buyer to position yourself if you want that home bad enough to say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, this is a guaranteed price. Now, why this gives you an advantage is because let's say buyer number 2 offered $200,000 and they did not have this clause in there because they simply don't want to put the clause in there, or they can't afford to bring up the extra cash. So what's going to happen is that offer is just going to be contingent upon the appraisal with no guarantees. If that home appraises for $185,000 or $190,000, that's what the seller is going to get. In most cases, the seller would be fine because they only wanted $190,000 for the home to begin with, right? And just using a $190,000 list price with multiple offers and the highest offer being $200,000 with an appraisal guarantee. So this would be an example of that. Now, the second way I would suggest this for a little bit more protection, depending on your scenario, talk to your realtor, your attorney, or whomever you're working with. This is where the buyer says, I'm going to pay $5,000 above appraised value up to a certain dollar amount, or you can just simply say $5,000 above appraised value. So let's say, same scenario, home is listed for $190,000. Buyer offers $200,000, but put a clause in there that says, I'm willing to pay $5,000 above appraised value. If the home appraises for $190, the buyer's going to pay a $195, not $200,000. Keep that in mind. So either way, the buyer's going to guarantee the seller $5,000 more than the appraisal value. But to protect yourself, you still want to put a limit on there. And typically the limit would be your offer. So let me break this down again. You have a list price of $190. You have multiple offers. You are offering $200,000. You put a clause in there saying, I'm willing to guarantee the buyer, as a buyer, I'm going to pay cash above the appraised value up to $200,000, or I'm going to pay $5,000 above appraised value, or I'm going to pay $5,000 above appraised value up to $200,000. There's technically 3 different scenarios. So not to confuse you, basically what you're saying in option 1 is you're going to guarantee the seller a $200,000 price regardless of appraised value. You're going to make up the difference. Option 2 is where you say, regardless of what it appraises for, because there's a chance it will not appraise for $200,000, I'm willing to pay $5,000 above the appraised value, which guarantees the seller $5,000 above. So let's say the house appraises for $190, then the seller's going to get $195 because the buyer's going to bring $195. The third option, which is not listed here, is a combination of both. Is when you say, I'm going to pay a dollar amount, in this case $5,000 above appraised value, up to $200,000, because that's what the offer was for. So option 3 only means that the buyer, you as the buyer, is only going to be obligated to $5,000 above the appraised value, not to exceed $200,000. All right. Any questions on this, just make comments in this video. So let's look at escalation clauses. So escalation clauses can be great. Actually, the idea behind escalation clauses are not new. You see a lot in auction scenarios, which in most cases, if you're in a multiple offer situation where they're requesting highest and best, technically it becomes like an auction scenario. So if you were on, say, auction.com or some of these platforms where you're bidding on a property and they have a price set, and if you want to bid, you have to bid in increments of, say, $5,000. So let's say the highest bid right now is $190. So you have to bid at least $195. Well, when you're dealing with a private seller, you're technically not seeing all the other offers. So what an escalation clause does is, if you ever watch like the stock market or invested in stocks and you put a limit order in or something like that, where you say, I'm willing to go up to this price, buy that market value, but no more than this, and it kind of works sort of like that. So just to break this down to you, an escalation clause, you have a couple options here. Again, we're going to use the $190,000 list price. You as the buyer, you offered $200,000 because you're in a competing multiple offer situation and you want this home. You offered $200,000 and you put in the contract, buyer agrees to pay $1,000 above highest offer, right? So let's say the house is listed for $190. Buyer A says, I'm going to offer $198, right? You come in as buyer number B, or buyer B, for example, and the house is listed for $190, and you offer $190, but you put a clause in there, you're willing to pay $1,000 above the highest offer. So every offer that comes in, one comes in for $195, you automatically are paying $196. The highest offer is $198. You are automatically paying $199. The highest offer is $200,000. You are paying $201,000 for that property. So this is always going to put you $1,000 ahead of the highest offer. Now, this can work for you, but this can always be tricky. I would always recommend option number 2. But where it gets tricky at is if multiple people put in escalation clauses for the same dollar amount. And now you got these bids just kind of bidding up, and the seller's just going to have to make a decision. But remember, it's not just price, it's also the other terms of the contract too. But these are just some pricing techniques that's going to help you win. I would recommend option 2 if you choose to put an escalation clause in. So option 2 would be, for example, buyer agrees to pay $1,000 above highest offer up to $250,000. So for example, let's just say again, home is listed for $190,000. You are buyer A. You offer $190,000. You put an escalation clause in your contract. You're willing to go $1,000 above the highest offer up to $200,000. Let's just use that as an example. Buyer B offers $195,000. So your offer is for $196,000, not $200,000. Buyer C offers $198,000. Your offer automatically pops up to $199,000. Now, as the buyer, or if you're being represented by a buyer's agent, if this happens, I would demand a copy of the next highest offer when the seller accepts your offer, because you want proof that if you're buying it at $199,000, you want proof that there was an offer at $198,000. This is a little bit more protection because there's a limit on what you're willing to pay. Now the issue happens when your limit is not the highest. So let's break this down. Let's say your offer A, you offered $190,000, escalation clause $1,000 above highest price up to $200,000. Offer B offers $198,000, that puts you at $199,000. Offer C offers $201,000. Well, you're no longer in a position to do $202,000 because your cap was $200,000. So you're not in a race, but this does protect you from just getting out of your budget for that particular property. Again, any questions, I can answer them in the comment section for you. Alright, so let's look at occupancy. Some states call it rent back or lease back or whatever. Our contract has an occupancy clause in there, which will allow the seller to occupy the property for a certain period of time after closing. Now, if you're doing it for sale by owner, or you're just working with an attorney and you're buying from a private seller not listed with the realtor, make sure there's a clause in there that someone, a third party, is gonna actually hold this money in escrow. Typically here in Michigan, in most of our contracts, it states that the title company is gonna hold this money, and it's basically negotiated, but in most cases, if you're getting a mortgage, it's negotiated based on your mortgage payment. So how this works, let's say you're buying a home and you're closing September 1st, but the seller cannot move for 30 days. So the seller is going to vacate October 1st, right? But you're paying a mortgage on that property for that month, and you want the seller to compensate you for those 30 days. So you can negotiate a price that you feel you're comfortable with, or you can base this amount based on your mortgage payment. What the title company is going to do, and basically what you have in your contract, is that, let's say your mortgage payment is $2,000 to keep things simple. The title company is going to hold $2,000 in escrow. If the seller moves in 15 days, it's going to be prorated based on the amount of days. So that $2,000 would be prorated based on a daily rate. So it would be 2,000 divided by 30. Whatever that daily rate is, it's going to be prorated. If the seller moves in 15 days, the buyer's going to receive 15 days of payment. The seller is going to be reimbursed for the remaining portion that they did not use. My recommendation is to have the title company hold the amount plus half, so times and a half. So if it's $2,000, I would recommend having the title company hold $3,000. Why do I say that? Because things happen. So for example, this is 2020. If you were in a deal and you gave the seller occupancy for 30 days and you closed March 1st and the seller had to be out by April 1st, but COVID hit and all of a sudden they can't move within that 30-day time frame, now you have an extra cushion there. In addition to that, I would recommend having holding a security deposit, right? So when we talk about security deposit, so let's say you're in a competing bid and you say, I want to do something extra. Let's just back up here. So just because the seller wants to live in the property 30 extra days after closing, you may say, well, I want this property and that 30-day cost is going to give the seller a lower net. You're going to give them 30 days free after closing to occupy the property. So basically what's going to happen is the seller is going to have the property have occupancy for 30 days after closing. So you close September 1st, they get to stay in the property for free until October 1st. Now, that's a good negotiating tool because it gives the seller some comfort and a place to stay for 30 days free. Who wouldn't want that? So that's going to give your offer a little bit more power and leverage. So, but if you do that, I would highly recommend that you have a security deposit in addition to, whether you're charging for occupancy or not, I would highly recommend a security deposit. The reason being is you want some protection in case the seller damages anything in the process of moving. So you did your final walkthrough, you closed. 30 days later, seller move out and there's 3 holes in the drywall, a window is busted at the side door or something like that, and you have money held by the title company or escrow company as security deposit. Nobody gets the money until both parties sign off. You prove that there's damage there that the seller's caused. You come up with a monetary cost for it, maybe have a contractor bid it, and you settle on, maybe it was $1,000 worth of damage. You had $3,000 in escrow for security deposit. You get $1,000, the seller gets the remaining $2,000. Always have that additional security deposit. Seller's concessions is pretty simple, but if you haven't purchased a home before or sat down with a loan rep or a realtor, basically seller's concessions can, as a buyer, sometimes can work against you, but there's ways to have it work in your favor as far as your offer price. So when we talk about terms, buyer A is offering $200,000, buyer B is offering $200,000, but want 6% in concessions. So technically, your offer is not $200,000 because you want the seller to give you 6% towards your closing costs, mortgage fees, and things of that nature. So that's technically $12,000, right? So your offer is no longer $200,000. Your offer is more or less a $188,000 offer compared to the first offer at $200,000. So keep that in mind. Sellers focus on the net, not the offer price. So one thing that you can do as a buyer is you can say, hey, talk with your realtor and say, what's the likelihood of this home appraising for maybe 210 or 215? Well, I'm going to offer 215 and ask the seller for 6% towards concessions, which is going to net the seller roughly about the 200,000. So you roll the price up and you ask for concessions back. Always recommend talking to your lender and your realtor if you're working with the realtor, because you want to know that it's a chance that this property will appraise at that price. Because if you're in the middle of a deal and it doesn't appraise and you can't afford to pay all your own closing costs, you're going to have some issues there, because you only offered that amount based on the fact of receiving concessions, and most sellers are not going to want to reduce their price again, their net again, so that you can have your closing costs paid, because it's costing the seller not out of pocket, but it's coming from the proceeds of their sale. So be careful when you're negotiating concessions. But again, I brought this up because it's impacting your offer being accepted. Buyer A is a more attractive buyer because they're offering $200,000 with no concessions. If you're offering $200,000, say with 3% concessions, that means technically your offer is a $194,000 offer, because the seller is giving you $6,000 back. All right. Inspection and contingencies. Now, we talked about this earlier. This is where you have a certain time period after your offer is accepted to have the property inspected to determine the condition of the property, any hidden defects, and things of that nature. I would highly recommend keeping this time frame under 10 days, but it really depends on your market and what's common in your market, and how what's the availability of home inspectors in your area, or during this time, or during the season, because there are certain seasons where all the home inspectors are extremely busy. You probably can't get somebody out in 3 days. You probably can't get someone out in 5 days. But keep in mind, I brought this up because if buyer A is offering full price and they waive their inspection, they don't want a private inspection. Buyer B has a full price offer and they want 3 days to have a private inspection. Buyer C offers $200,000 and won $1,000 over, but they want 10 days to have a private inspection. Buyer A may be more attractive to the seller because they're not even having an inspection. We're just processing the paperwork so that we can close, right? Buyer C needs 10 days, so that extra $1,000, although it's a higher price, the seller might say, well, I have to wait 10 days, and they still may want to negotiate after the inspection. And if they want to negotiate, you know, say $3,000, now I'm stuck with, you know, $198,000 purchase price versus buyer A that was just giving the seller $200,000 with no inspection. As a realtor, investor, I will always recommend having a private inspection if you're buying a home, some form of inspection. Even if you don't make your offer contingent upon the inspection, you don't have to make your offer contingent. You can just get the inspection for information purposes only. So for example, I see a lot of investors, they will make an offer on a property and they plan on gutting the entire house, redoing all the electrical, plumbing, and things of that nature. They're basically just having an inspection done, because they may find out, hey, I don't need to gut all the plumbing and redo it all. The plumbing may be fine where I don't have to put in all new pipes throughout the home. So their offer is not necessarily contingent upon the inspection. They're just doing it for informational purposes only. Or they may make it contingent upon inspection because they're fine with everything else in the house, but they just want to check the foundation or something that they seen didn't look right, so they want to have a private inspection. So keep that in mind as well. All right, so let's look at of course, repairs, repair credits. Once the inspections are done, you want to, when you're negotiating an offer, keep this in mind. Talk to your lender, but in most cases, a lot of people have an understanding that just because it's an FHA offer, that the seller has to do all the repairs. So if you look at an FHA amendment or addendum, you'll see a lot of times it has on there, it'll say who's responsible for the repairs. So maybe FHA comes out and say, hey, the garage needs to be painted, right? And the seller may not have the money, because keep in mind, not all sellers are selling as is because they don't want to do the repairs. Some sellers are selling as is because they can't afford to do the repairs. So let's just say you find a good deal on a property, the seller is selling the property as is, and you're buying a property. Investors know this all the time, but if you're a homeowner, buyer, owner, occupant buyer, and you're gonna buy that home to live in it, and say FHA comes out and say, hey, there's a crack in the sidewalk and the garage needs to be painted, right? And those repairs have to be done prior to closing so that they can property can meet FHA guidelines. Seller doesn't have the money. You can say, hey, we'll take, $1,000 off the price, $2,000, whatever the cost is, and we'll just pay to have the contractor to come out and do the repairs so that we can pass inspection. Now, if you're going to have that agreement and you're going to make repairs on someone else's home, I would make sure you have some wording in there to protect yourself in case the seller doesn't go through with the deal. Talk to your attorney, talk to your realtor, broker, whoever you're working with. But the reason I brought that up is because that's an option. If you're making an offer to a seller and that seller sees that you're going to assume all repairs, that's going to be a lot more attractive than someone else who made an FHA offer and maybe they just say, hey, seller to fix all FHA required repairs. So that's going to give you an advantage. One thing you can do is when you have your private inspection, typically you're going to have your private inspection before the appraisal is completed. Your private inspection will actually show you some repairs that may be FHA required repairs, and you can go back to the seller and say, hey, let's drop the price $5,000 and I'll assume all the repairs. So there's different ways to negotiate that. If you're working with a good realtor, your realtor can sometimes point out some things that they know FHA would write up once you go look at the property, and then you can just put that up front in your offer. Say, hey, buyer's willing to assume FHA repairs up to $3,000 or up to $2,000. This way, if FHA, the appraiser comes out and there's repairs cited and they're over $2,000, you can assume the first $2,000 and the seller can assume the remaining repairs, or you can still negotiate a price reduction and assume the remaining balance of those repairs as well. So that gives you some flexibility and puts you in a position to accept, to get your offers accepted, because that's another way of negotiating. Again, these are all the terms of an offer where pricing alone will not get you that deal. There are different ways to negotiate your offer and get your offer accepted with the seller. And again, it's not just about the pricing. A lot of people are stuck on a price, and You bid on a property, there were multiple offers, and you bid, the house was listed for 190, you offered 200,000. 2 months later, you see the home sold for 193,000. Again, it's not just price, it's also the terms. It can be financing, repairs, concessions. A number of things can determine why a seller will accept an offer. Most sellers are looking at the net, not the price, and they're looking at the additional terms and how convenient is this offer for me to just sell my home. Again, this is Reginald Perryman with RegisRealEstate.com. Follow me on all social media platforms. Hit all the like buttons and all that good stuff. And until next time, I'll see you. Feel free to contact me at RegisRealEstate.com, or just make some comments in the comment section and I'll answer all your questions at that time.